Meteos. Is this the Nintendo DS game? Hope I got paid for life. I don't know about that. I mean, if I keep my current living standard, I'm not paid for life, but I'm paid for a while. But if I move to like the middle of New Mexico or something, yeah, I'm paid for life. I mean, I have enough saved up, you know. Home weather station on ESP32. What is that? It's a micro. Okay. So this is where the program is, and does this project include? I guess that's what front end, back end, and sensor are. Those three different thingies. Okay. Oh, you got a diagram. Cool. So that's the ESP. And it talks to the back end. Is this project supposed to be hosted, or is this like, will this run on my router or on my machine or something? Wait, a front end server. And then the client web browser. I wonder why these two are separate. I guess we'll find out. Is it normal to feel lost, incapable when you learn? Yep, especially early on. There's so many things to learn, and you don't even realize what things are. You don't realize how much depth there is to so many things when you're learning. It's kind of like mathematics, where you're learning addition and then you learn subtraction of integers. But when you're learning subtraction, you don't know there's negative numbers. And you may not learn that addition, you may not learn that subtraction is really addition, but you're negating the thing on the right. And you're going to learn, you need to learn those tricks in order to go more and more advanced, but you don't realize that those things are hidden in plain sight. It's the same with programming. There's so many things that are there that even though you're overwhelmed now, if you learned the truth, your mind will explode. So it's totally fair that you get lost. And it's also very easy to get overloaded and get into the details too much. But do I have good experience with Docker? I don't have good experience. I have bad experience. I assume that Art1N would have more experience because they actually made something more substantial with Docker than I have. Is it possible to read console output from another program that's still running and not yet terminated? Of another program? Yes and no. It depends. Everything is possible in software. You could read the memory of the terminal emulator to see what was printed historically. You could read the history by hacking into the terminal emulator or something like that. You know, you could do anything with software, but you could probably make your life a lot simpler if you structure things in the right way so that you're set up to capture that data beforehand, instead of like realizing after the fact you need to capture it, but you never set it up that way, so you got to do some backflips and stuff. Use Docker because C++ doesn't have good standard build system and package manager. Okay, that's fair. AI chatbot, didn't we talk about that? Use a video element. So, Art1N, did you want me to look at the sensor or the server thing? Give me a good starting point to look at. And what kind of feedback do you want? Do you want feedback on how... I guess you want feedback on how C++-ish the C++ code is? Firmware and server. That's a lot to cover. Let's see, where do we start? Radio Bluetooth, radio Wi-Fi, sensors? I don't know where the entry point is or where the setup is. Is it in config? No. Where would the entry point be? It's not in here, is it? INO? I don't know what .ino means. How do you become as good as me at JavaScript? You write a lot of JavaScript code, you read a lot of JavaScript code. And you listen to what other people are saying. Probably in that order. You should write a lot of code so you can actually understand what the features are and what the consequences are of certain choices you make. You should read other people's code so that you get an understanding of what other ways there are to solve problems. And you should listen to other people because there might be new things coming in the language or things that are really new that people haven't written a lot of code for yet that you may want to try out yourself. So you need to have a good mix of all kinds of inputs for learning. But basically you just need to do it for many years. How do you read the console? Copatend, you can, let's see, node process, child processes. Are you spawning it with child process? If so, you can set an stdio to say, you probably want pipes, but maybe not. You may want something more advanced. But most likely you would make a pipe. But again, it depends on how the thing is written. If it's like a console video game or something, pipe isn't going to cut it. You're going to need to do more advanced stuff. Entry for the sensors. Yeah, I figured that out. What was my position? How long did I work there? I worked there 6.5 years or so. Maybe 6 years, something like that. Hello Memphis. Hello Meowpo. All of them seem to only pipe after the exe is terminated. While the program... are you sure? What do you mean all of them? Like all these thingies? Can you share your code? Because maybe there's some thing in your code that you're not doing right. Anyway, let's look at this sensor. So you got the setup and the loop and the doop-a-doop. So display initialize, draw the logo, config, wait, draw the logo. Oh, on this screen? Okay. I thought this was like a 7-segment display thing, but no, it's a LCD. Bluetooth in it. Blue button. Is this button? Why don't you call this button instead of button? Because it looks very similar to BT. I was reading this. I was like, you initialize Bluetooth and you initialize Bluetooth again. I'm like, what? And then, oh, this is a button, not Bluetooth. In the same vein, I would call, instead of BT, I would call it Bluetooth, but BT is probably fine. So it is a bit cryptic. Okay, let's look at, I'm only going to look at the sensor stuff because I think it's going to be too much work to look at everything. So let's look at display. Let's look at your header file first. Okay. I have no clue what this is. Or rather, I mean, I know what this is the name of the part, but like, what is it? What does this struct mean? This is weird. Why do you have instance? That's peculiar, because you already have a variable with the instance. Display instance. Where are you using this? Nowhere? Delete this variable. You're not using it anywhere. You're just storing to it once, but you're not reading it from anywhere inside the class, and it's private, so it's just it seems like it's dead code, so delete that. Where I got so much experience with C++, assuming it wasn't part of your job. Most of my experience with C++ was at my job at Facebook. But actually, I got most of my... Yeah, it was mostly at Facebook. Hey, Vexed. Yeah, I had to take a call, so I couldn't hear your response. But yeah, I was definitely judging you. It was more that I hopped on your stream, Vexed, and then I saw you're doing stuff, but it wasn't Beautiful Soup. So I was like asking what you were doing by making the statement that this wasn't Beautiful Soup. And then you said goodbye, so that kind of sucked. But then I had to leave. I had to do a phone call before you got back. Oh, you have get instance? Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, let me clone this code. So I can grep properly. We're in the sensor. So we want to look for uses of display get instance. You're using it once in log. Okay. So what I would do, so the problem with what you're doing is you already have a global reference right here. You have this global variable, which is the display. You don't need to have a separate pointer that you initialize for the display. You can just have, this log code reference this global variable, and then you're fine, right? You don't need to do this get instance stuff. When you try it with get to get, it doesn't work. Because wget will print things on standard output or standard error by default. Geek Panther. Normally, status messages in Unix programs are printed to standard error, and the output, like the normal output that you would want to use, that you want to save, usually goes to standard output. But wget doesn't save to standard output by default; it saves to a file by default. So you have to opt into saving to standard output, and then you can do your redirection to dev null, which is kind of stupid, but. Made a container replace your links list in ECS. Oh, sure thing, Meowpo. Like std array is an example where the array size is known at compile time because it's a template parameter. So if you haven't seen std array, maybe check it out. It's a bit easier to work with than C arrays, but it's also harder to work with in some other areas. But maybe you could check out std array. Not that it would help you, but it might give you a different perspective. Everything else was dealing with the strings you got from Beautiful Soup? Well, I saw, when I joined, I saw you were reading some things from a file. And that's all that was on the screen. But yeah, Beautiful Soup is great. But it's kind of awkward sometimes, but. Well, what did you want piping to dev null to do, Geek Panther? std array iterator? Why would you want std array iterator? The only real reason I think that this isn't just a pointer, that the iterator isn't just a pointer, is so that they can a standard library can add debug checking, where you can't add debug checking to a raw pointer. But I would use raw pointers unless you have a very good reason to use iterator instead, because pointers are iterators for containers like vector and array. You don't want the outputs to be shown. I don't know, there's a random thing. So you don't want outputs to be shown. There should be a dash quiet option. This is the good way to not show output, because if there's an error, what did that do? Oh, that's just there's google.com. So we get an error here, and if we do dash quiet, I guess we don't get that output. But that's, well, maybe oogle's a bad example. I guess quiet really shuts it up. But if you didn't want to use quiet, you can put standard error to dev null instead. I think that's what you wanted. So file descriptor 2 is standard error, whereas file descriptor 1, which is the default, is standard output. But what is this get high score stuff? Two is standard error, so 0 is standard in, and 1 is standard out, and 2 is standard error. There's no negative anything. Should I use a star or an iterator for performance? For std array, it doesn't matter. There's no difference. It's just like there's no difference in terms of performance. for specifically standard array. If there is, then your standard library is a pile of trash and you should delete it. What editor do I use? I'm using Zeesh as how I input text, and well, I usually use Vim, so this is Vim here. Vexed, I'll get to your question after we're through with Art1N stuff, because I've been kind of not focused on this. We got draw logo. Draw logo. Wait, we didn't finish looking at init. So we got a scoped logger. What would are you logging things to the screen or to like a serial connection or what? Or are you just doing performance tracing? Scope logger. Okay, okay. Cool, cool. I like this. I mean, I like the scope logger stuff you got. It's cool. Very useful utility. Oh, you have this to display thing. Cool. So let's look at your string. Is string provided by Arduino? Or did you write this yourself? I assume it's in Arduino, not something you made. So I don't know the performance characteristics of this. Or like if this cast is necessary or what. I'm not familiar with string. I am using the Mince distribution, yes. Marco. Alright, Miapo. Sounds good. Why are you choosing between Vim and Emacs? Sensei. Why not look at other options? Display begin. What does that mean? Where's begin? Or is this a member variable? Oh, that's that thing. Okay. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Set contrast to magic number. Cool. Draw logo. Set font. Whatever the heck this is. Is this an enum thing or is this a global variable? I guess maybe I can search. Literal 1. Oh, it's a string thing? Oh, it's one of these. Okay. But you use this twice. Oh, okay. Got it. Draw string, x, y, string name. Send buffer. Okay. That looks fine. You can use Vim extensions VS Code. Yep. Or you can keep your sanity and not do that. I assume the inits aren't too interesting, so let's look at this loop. Say time, loop sample. If we're not in config mode, we loop sample. Oh, that's okay. That's this. Why is it called loop sample and not just sample? Weird. If we have an elapsed sample delay, then return. Okay. Take the sample, then we post the sample. Got it. Is this... As far as C++-ish code goes, this looks fine. You got these magic numbers. I don't know if it's supposed to be the same thing or what. This you can write as a modulus, just as a, like, this isn't C++ specific or anything, but you can write that as sample reading index is sample reading index plus 1 mod 4, or you can write it as, you can separate the increment if you really want. But these three chunks are all the same, assuming this is always 0 or positive. If this is ever goes negative, then it gets confusing, but I don't think you're doing that. Yeah. So I would use enums here instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, but if this is the only place you really use them, then you're fine. Title. Okay, this is a bit alarming. Title, you should make title a const char pointer. There's no need to make a string, because you assign to it with a bunch of, these are char pointers, they could decay to char pointers, and then you call cster to get back a char pointer. You may as well just make title a char pointer, and then you don't need cster, you don't need to construct a capital S string. Same with value units, you don't need to create a string. Is the mod for in C++ a Boolean? No. What do you mean a bool? It's not asking. Oh, whoops. I didn't finish my thought there. Whoops. No, it's not a bool. As I said, it's doing the same thing as this up here. Well, I mean, it's not the exact same thing. If this was 1,000, then this would make it 0. But if we had 1,000 mod 4 and we increment it, we'll get 1. So if sample reading IDX starts at 1,000, here we increment it, then we check it's greater than 4. It is 1,001 is greater than 4, then set it 0. But if we did this code, we'll say 1,000 plus 1, so 1,001 mod 4, and that would be 1. So that would give you a different result. But I don't think it's doing anything like that. I think it's just like cycling between 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. And that's what modulus is good at. Have I ever worked with FPGAs or embedded devices? I worked with FPGAs a little bit, like a tiny bit. I worked with embedded devices quite a bit in the game console area for Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color and Nintendo DS. and also on WonderSwan, which is a Japanese console, some other stuff. There's only one branch op versus 3 to 5 increments. You can't really say what's going on. I mean, this could be compiled down to a modulus in theory. I don't think that this code is very sensitive to that kind of optimization or micro optimization because we're allocating strings and stuff, so I don't think that matters too much. It's more about the readability. There are more. What do you mean by inc? You mean including? Do you mean incrementing? Increment operations? I don't know what you mean by inc. Is reading shown? Okay. That's what you're doing. Okay. And then when you draw next reading, that's down here. Is reading shown? You have this expression duplicated in a few spots. Got it there, and you have something similar here. So I'd say maybe put that in a function. Like, has time elapsed since last reading or something? I don't know. Oh, these are different variables. Okay, so maybe I don't know. Draw wait config. Where do we call draw next? Oh, there it is. So you gotta push the button in order to get the reading. That makes sense. Only one branch operation versus 3 to 5 increments. There's only one increment here and one increment here. I don't know what you mean by increments. How can there be more than one increment? Function call is slow? What do you mean function call is slow? First off, what makes you say that? Second off, you're already doing a ton of function calls. Third off, you're already doing a bunch of work unrelated to function calls that you don't need to do, like what I said about the strings. Though I assume this this isn't going to be happening every millisecond or something, but still. Like, one of the good things about C++ is you don't have to have the mindset of function calls are slow. Or you shouldn't have the mindset of function calls are slow. You should be able to factor your code that in a way that makes sense, and it'll compile down to the machine code that makes sense. So you can make your code look how it's supposed to and have it compile correctly. That's something you can't do as well in C because you don't have things like classes and templates to help you out. Not that those are necessary, but for a lot of problems, those help a lot. Like std chrono milliseconds means you can do this subtraction and this comparison without like doing, because this is microseconds, I assume, and now is in milliseconds, and it's just doing a conversion for you automatically, like multiplying by 1,000 or dividing by 1,000, whatever, to get them all the same unit. And if you were in C, you would have to probably have macros or something, or have a consistent unit across the code base, and both of those are prone to error. So C++ gives you that abstraction power, but it doesn't penalize you for that abstraction, for using those abstractions in general. Sometimes it does. Saving microseconds from a function call? Is your function call taking microseconds? I guess. Oh, if it's like a 1 megahertz machine, then maybe, but can you get rid of macros? No. No, you can't. I mean, you can technically get rid of them, but macros are still an important part of code base of C++ and real code bases. Like you're using macros for your logger thing. If you didn't have this, you would need to make explicitly a global variable, or not a global variable, a local variable. And that means you can't, like here I would, in your scoped logger, wherever the heck it was, log is a log.h. Did I have it open in? Come on. Oh, in utils. Like I would also log maybe the file name and the line number or something, maybe to just make it easier to see, to correlate things in the logs. Otherwise, you kind of have to search for this string, which is probably fine, but like because you have a macro, you're able to easily add a file name or line number or something else. There are things coming in C++ 20 that make that possible without macros, but they don't work yet. For you, C++ macros feel like a hack unrelated language. You're not going to be able to do this if stuff without macros. It's global scope, it's not type checked, etc. Well, templates aren't type checked. Constants for if. What would go inside of the if? What's the if condition? Riddle me this. Where else should I look? Because so far everything seems fine as far as like the goodness of the C++. Why are you using std string here, whereas you were using a Arduino string in other places? That seems weird. I mean, I don't know the benefits of using Arduino string. I don't know what the difference is, but I assumed that you wouldn't have std string available, which is why you're using Arduino string. But apparently not. How about I implement REST API in C++? I don't know. I think it really depends on the constraints of the project. It's really a case-by-case thing. If I was just, my initial pass would be to use GNU's HTTP server library, this one. I've used this before and it's pretty good, but I haven't stressed it or anything, so I don't know how well it works in like heavy environments or something. But for if your project is not primarily a REST server, but it's primarily something else, and it just happens to need a server, a web component to it, then I think this project is a good thing to use, and I've enjoyed using it. Do I have any experience with Arduino String? No, I have not experienced Arduino String. So is the password for Wi-Fi, or is it password for the service? Because there's also a host port. Is this the host and port of a service, or is it supposed to be the device's advertised host and I don't know what advertised host and port would mean. So I guess this would be, I'm not sure. Let's see, where are you using SSID? You're using it there. You're saying Wi-Fi begin stuff. And how are you using host? Client connect. Okay. So this class really has two concerns. One is setting up the Wi-Fi, and two is posting this stuffs. Hey, look, a smiley face. I don't know why a smiley face. Oh, because you have the R. I think this is a bad use of the R literals because it's so short that it ends up being noisy. I would just use the normal double quote and then escape my. Maybe that's just because I'm used to. I'm used to the old way of doing things without the raw literals. Like here, this isn't necessary. You don't need to do a raw literal for a right curly bracket. For the other ones, it kind of makes sense, but. How about consuming a REST API from C or C++? Libcurl would be the thing that I go to. I don't really like libcurl though, but it's pretty standard, and it's probably gonna have a good port on your platform. So I'd say use libcurl. You got a question? Consistency. This is C++. We don't do consistency. You don't got no raw literals around here. Changing the length. If you could, if it makes sense to call print multiple times, I would do that instead of concatenating this thing into memory. Because this relies on you having enough memory to store the full response, which I assume you have enough memory, otherwise this wouldn't work. But if you're in a somewhat constrained environment, I wouldn't be just concatenating strings in memory like this. I would push them into the output buffer. Host port, posting, content type. Okay. And here. Client stop return. Why not? You could just use a break here because you're already calling client stop there. but I guess that's just stylistic. You could also use, I don't know if Wi-Fi client automatically calls stop. If it automatically calls stop, then there's no need for you to call stop. If it automatically calls stop when in its destructor, then you don't need to call stop yourself. But maybe it doesn't, so I don't know.